Good afternoon. Welcome to 25 Minutes with Cap. Today, we're going to be talking about using AI in insurance. Each month, we discuss recent trends in the specialty insurance space. My name is Adam Sills. Today, I'm excited to have Otakar Hubschmann joining us. This is our first in-person 25 minutes. As you can tell by the not perfect lighting that we've set up here in the room. We tried this with the 5 minutes with Cap and when we were at WSIA. So hopefully you guys will all enjoy this. Otakar is the head of applied data at TransRe. His team seeks to monetize data through machine learning and applied data science. Previously, he spent his career as a portfolio manager and trader at international banks and hedge funds, building, trading, and managing risk for both quantitative and discretionary proprietary trading strategies.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, hey, as we go on from here, if you have questions through the session, feel free to enter them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them. Lastly, just a reminder, the content of this webinar is the property of CapSpecialty and is for informational purposes only. You're not permitted to republish, share, or quote for this webinar without the prior written consent of CapSpecialty, which can be obtained by contacting marketing@capspecialty.com. We hope you enjoy it. How'd you develop this area of expertise?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's sort of a one of one, but my story is probably a little different in that I didn't study this type of stuff at all in college.
What'd you study?
So to set the context, I went to Georgetown to study. I was in their school of foreign service, so I went, or was like ostensibly to go take the foreign service exam, which I didn't want to do, but I really liked the curriculum. But what wound up happening was I tried out for lacrosse, I got cut, and then I walked on and I wound up being All-American a couple times. And so I was interested like in playing lacrosse,
sure.
And so where I learned this stuff is I got out of college and through a friend of a friend, I managed to get a job trading on a trading floor in Nomura Securities. And so I had fantastic teachers, and it was like the most practical kind of learning. It was like, we're going to do systematic trading. So build me a this. And it was a very straight line between keeping your job and building the thing well. So I learned basically completely through practical experience. And so, as you said in the intro, I traded for a number of years. And now I'm at TransRe for about 7 running this group.
So everyone's talking about artificial intelligence now, and you can't read an article without someone talking about what they're doing within it, why it's the future, so on and so forth. What's new about it versus what's repackaged under a different name?
So what's interesting about this latest wave is that this is really new and different in that previously we used machine learning and artificial intelligence to make predictions, and that's called discriminative machine learning. And now we have this generative AI, which is like the large language models like GPT and Gemini from Google just came out yesterday. And that actually—
How is it?
It's great. No, I mean, it is better than— what's interesting about it is it's slightly better than GPT-4, but only slightly. So now the state of the art for GPT is GPT-4 Turbo. So what's interesting is that there was so much hoopla around it, and it still remains to be seen because it's just from yesterday, but it's only slightly better than the past version of GPT.
How do you make that decision one day after it's announced?
That's a great question. So how do you figure out, what does success look like? What is it? How do you quantify it? So there's a number of tests that they run each of these large language models through, and they're like high school math tests, college math tests, different types of standardized tests. And so you use that as a benchmark. And in machine learning and AI, that's been used for decades, having this idea of benchmarks to be able to say, this one's better, this one's worse.
So back to what you were talking about of what's new now with, you're talking about GPT, Gemini, what are people so excited about now?
So the thing that's what's different this time? Why should you care this time? So I've been in sort of AI machine learning since maybe 2010. And this is the most profound change that I've witnessed, in that generative AI you can think of it sort of like a math function where you put something in and it spits something out, and it can actually do things. It can almost make things. So it can do tasks, and it's sort of like general purpose computer. Whereas previously with like discriminative AI and machine learning, you could make predictions with it. 1, 0, yes, no, a numerical prediction, which is helpful, but this is much more general purpose helpful. So you'll be able to automate away many of the previously sort of difficult, mundane, rote things where that was prone to like a lot of transposition errors. And my experience in the insurance reinsurance industry, that is going to solve for a lot of things, such that in years, things will be automated in a way that, 3-5 years down the line, that project you have that's quarterly, or that project that you have that's annual, will be something you talk to a virtual assistant to literally do for you. And you'll set it up and you'll seed it with the information, but it will take on sort of a more semi-autonomous tact towards doing things for you. So the real like sort of science fiction virtual assistant that we've talked, people talk about in the past, and it's all over the movies. We're much closer to that. And that,
by the way, how did it happen? Is it incremental growth, or was there one late at night in the lab
right
situation?
A couple of people in the garage. So there's a now famous paper from 2017 called "Attention is All You Need," which it was from people from Google, and it introduced a new type of neural network architecture called transformers. And like very intuitive explanation of a large language model, which GPT is. It's sort of like, think about it like a quiz show. So it's like Warren Buffett is the CEO of blank. And what's like the statistical probability of each of the possible answers of the universe, right? And so you can contextually understand that he would be more likely to be the CEO of Berkshire, because that's how he shows up in the training data. And this new neural network architecture called transformers made it much easier for the algorithm to understand context. And so it made the output of these models much better. And then the other thing that's like can't be ignored is that the compute power and the use of GPUs is better than it's ever been.
Sure.
So you can run things faster, better. And now that these models are out in the open, there's so much open source work towards taking like the idea of like higher dimension data. So like another like sort of way to think about it is, you walk down the street, Adam Sills, a 3D person, you cast a shadow against the wall. The shadow is like a 2D representation of you. It retains some of the information, but not all. But for machine learning, we want to take that higher dimension representation of the data and make it get shorter for computation. And so GPUs plus the neural network architecture plus now this idea of being able to contract the size and in some cases be able to run them locally on a computer. It's like all happening at once. And then there was something that happened with Meta released something that they quote unquote leaked weightings, but they had it under an academic license. So people could basically not use it to make money, but they could use it to research. And once that got out into the public, there was a massive wave of innovation because it was in people's hands, and sort of like the toothpaste, pick your euphemism, was out of the tube.
Sure. So you started talking about insurance, and you're going to have this virtual assistant. As you look, you're in the reinsurance space. What are the areas that you see the quickest application?
Yeah.
And from there.
Yeah. So I think I think the stages are going to be like this. I think that initially, for the next couple of years, and again, this is all with like the asterisks that things are changing so fast, it's hard to predict. The things are changing multiples faster than sort of say like Moore's law. So it's hard to extrapolate out what it's going to look like in 3 years or 5 years. Who knows? You could be talking to my avatar in 3 years.
Right.
So the way I think it's going to work in insurance and reinsurance is initially there's going to be a wave of automating the am I real?
Yeah, back with the avatar. Go ahead.
There'll be a wave of automating the things that have been manual, and everything will sort of be additive and build on itself. So the stuff that's the wave of automation will lead to cleaner, better data from which we'll be able to derive, quote unquote insights, which is like sort of like a dirty word. What I want my things that I build and my team build to literally tell you stuff, not be like you have to do the extra work of like, let me get some insights from it. So anyway, we'll be building stuff with cleaner, better data, which will give you better information, better, again, I'll use the term insights. And from there, we'll be able to make predictions on these insights to help further automate. And then it will be like the bionic with the machine with the human, and then eventually some lines will be completely underwritten. I'm going to get my hate mail for this, but some lines will be completely underwritten autonomously. But in the same way, in the same way that there's quantitative trading in hedge funds and there's discretionary trading in hedge funds, and quantitative is the model-driven trading, and discretionary is I like Apple, I don't like this stock, so I'll buy and I'll short this one. And
when you expect the machine to ultimately make that decision too?
So this is the part of the talk where I usually say, so I traded for a long time and I completely believe in the domain expertise from years of doing the thing, the times up at bat of the thing. So I think for certain lines of business, it will always be better human plus augmentation through using like the machine. It'll be like, exoskeleton making you stronger, better, faster decisions, more precise decisions on a broader scale. And for some lines, the ones that you will be able to automate will be like, commoditized lines with a lot of data. Initially, it'll have to be cleaner data.
So you were starting to go to, you're going to start to see lines that are just completely underwritten automatically.
Yeah.
Which lines do you think those are?
Well, I think, again, with the asterisk that I'm not an underwriter, but I was a trader for almost 20 years. I mean, I think certainly parts of property will be. And I think about it in terms of volume of data, velocity of data, how often we get it, what cadence, and variety of data, right? So more commoditized, the better. I think certain parts of, mortgage is a one that's interesting because it always offers, the existential dread of potentially blowing up if the market turns down, but it has very good data because it's all run through, the government.
Sure.
So those two off the bat, I think,
is the AI always right?
No, definitely. The AI is not always right. And oftentimes if the AI is too right, it means that it's basically taken a pattern of the data and then apply that pattern to every other set of data that it sees. And that's something called overfitting, which is probably one of the biggest issues in machine learning. The way that in machine learning, it's called machine learning because you want more, better, cleaner data to iterate towards something you're striving for. And that's like, say, for instance, some better underwriting ratio, combined ratio. And you have sort of the ideal thing you want to hit and how far away from it you are, the error rate. And then you're iterating, shaving to try to get right at that thing. And that's an idealistic version. That never really happens. But you have a goal.
Sure. One of the things that people have talked about with insurance is that it's kind of historically been a slow adapter of technology. Well, I mean, coming from the trading floor, I think that's historically been it's been a different story.
Yeah.
Do you, has that been the same thing here with AI? You know, are you seeing a lot of, hey, I don't want anything to affect or adjust my underwriting judgment or our operational judgment?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big question. And again, I can only speak from my experience, but like when I was at the hedge funds and trading, it was like unabashedly whatever edge you can get.
Sure.
It very, I'm not going to be sentimental about it. I'm going to get my alpha wherever I can get it.
Right.
And that's certainly been my anecdotal experience. Like I said, I've been in the industry 7 years, is that it's just been different.
But an insurance company would say that too. I mean, well, an insurance company would say, hey, any opportunity for more underwriting profit.
Yeah, and I would think that that's what I would expect to hear, right? But to be fair, there's a spectrum of responses. Some people are like, hey, I've underwritten for 20, 25 years. Who are you to tell me to change my style? And I completely respect that, because that is.
Well, you respect it, but do you agree with him?
So I respect it. I don't necessarily, I respectfully disagree with that if I can improve upon it. And again, it's like, hey, no hard feelings. We just want to make the most money we can and have the fewest losses we have. And if that looks like fully automated, which that's not happening for a while, but if that looks like some combination of augmenting, certainly teeing up decisions, sort of like decision triage through machine learning, is something that right now, I talk to underwriters who are like, hey, all day long, I'll do that. That's terrific. And some other underwriters say, I have my way, or they just don't call me back. So I respect both things. My job as it exists now is to take the most cutting edge tools that exist and use it to help our underwriters and my company, TransRe, again, unabashedly make the most money we can.
So, I mean, I imagine that everyone would say, yeah, sure, sounds good.
Right.
But I got to imagine that the difficulty is in the application. That
absolutely.
Where are the places where there have been successes, as much as you could talk about, with application, and also where has it been particularly difficult?
So, without giving away too much, with understanding that it's like sort of all proprietary, we've had a lot of success again on it's so up until this point, it's been 95% of like the prediction discriminative AI stuff.
Sure.
And this new wave of the generative AI is going to be much more initially automate, clean, tee up the data to put in our discriminative models. We've had a lot of success in specialty lines. And I don't know, I mean, like, I'll leave it at that. But I mean, we've had enough success that it would be a very well trading model at a hedge fund, for instance.
And let's leave it there. But how about, where do you find difficulty? And it doesn't necessarily on an underwriting basis, but just where is it challenging applying to the insurance business?
That's a good question. So it's generally speaking difficult to apply any of this stuff. It's impossible if you don't have enough data to begin with. And then it's increasing levels of difficulty if the data is all over the place, if you have systems sort of from corporate actions and M&A stuff from buying other companies, systems that don't talk to one another.
Yeah.
So it helps to have a centralized system, as much data as possible.
And this is a problem insurance companies have.
Exactly.
Sure.
So that's the thing. And then first and foremost, you need basically a boss to say, go for it.
Mm,
And in my case, the person that brought me in is now our CEO, Ken Brand. And he was someone who brought me in 7 years ago. And it was maybe a decision bringing me in 7 years ago, which would be sort of like, well, why would you do that? But now it seems almost like, well, of course you would want to have that. And so we've had like a 7-year start on other people because
that's
of
awesome.
that vision. And now everybody wants to employ sort of this type of job.
So it's interesting. You talked about this super virtual assistant before, and I got to imagine that this virtual assistant would have to have access to every single piece of information
Ah,
within the insurance business, all the claims data, personnel
right,
data, all of that.
right.
So that comes to the next question, which is, you know, how do you deal with security?
Well, so of course, like the security is one of like the paramount security, privacy is like one of the paramount concerns. It's like a
Sure.
sort of a non-starter to attempt to do it
Sure.
without. So the thing that you're talking about, like as it exists now, you could, as a company, go to OpenAI company and say, I want a GPT on my company's entire data. Now you would have to find that data,
Right.
which is going to take a long time. And if you in fact found the data, that costs between, like I said, current state, $2 to $3 million to make, which in the grand scheme of things would sort of be nothing if it would have all these benefits.
Right.
And that price is going to completely come down too.
Right.
So what I think is going to happen in the next couple years, while people are sort of scrambling to get into this, is there'll be a lot of focus on where's my data, how can I clean it, how much do I trust it, how do I aggregate it, before they can do anything. So it was like we talked about previously, like you can't just say, hey, I want an Otakar. Hey, Otakar, welcome to X Corp. Do AI.
Right.
So you need all these prerequisites. You need like the mise en place of AI, which is clean data, standardized data, and enough data to even have a sort of a seat at the table to begin that conversation.
What is going to be, what's the bear case for the insurance company on this? I mean, what is, if someone were to adapt or to adopt many or most of these techniques, what's the biggest negative they could be looking at?
In terms of utilizing it, like what happens from utilization?
Yes.
So if we think out like a little bit of time, I think that right now, in terms of, these large language models can do what's called hallucinations, which just really means they output mistakes.
Sure.
And right now, it's about 3 or 4% on the current GPT model, which is, in grand scheme of things, pretty good. And like, again, I always tell people,
not if you're making an underwriting decision.
That's right. This is sort of apples to oranges and how I think about it.
Enough.
And so this is the worst AI you will ever use is right now. And it's pretty good.
Sure.
So something I could see down the line, which would almost be a good problem to have because it would mean that we've come so far in the industry. In 2007, I think in August, there was a sort of a big quantitative trading finance in Wall Street, like sort of flame out, where one of the reasons was that a number of companies had used the same sort of risk models to make their decisions. And they thought they were putting them in safe places, but instead they were actually pulling them, the models were telling them to pull them together. So, but that came from having great data that was standardized, up and running models. So that's something that I could see happen, that type of correlation incident, which causes like a crash. And it's a little different because, the duration, the timing, the cadence is different in insurance. And would be interesting because it wouldn't be apparent until like it would bubble up later and later.
Sure.
So that's something I could see. And that's a little bit of like a meta second level thing. I mean, right now, the biggest issue would be the privacy issue, making sure it was private and just making sure you checked your answers to the tests, that they weren't wrong.
All right. So I think we're running out of time. I got one last thing. It's hard to make a technology prediction in insurance over a year, but how about if you give in the next 5 years, give a bold prediction on this?
In the next 5 years, like I think I had said previously, you're gonna have your projects that were your quarterly projects, your annual projects, your monthly projects.
You think that's going to be happening?
That's going to be happening, maybe not 100% for sure, but I know this because we're literally building this stuff now
Right.
with the current tech.
Right.
So I know I can tell you that if everything goes well at my current company, we will be solving some of these problems in a year, 18 months. So,
Right. Hey, thanks for the time.
oh, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining.